Welcome back to Fox and Friends. The Pentagon announced another drug boat strike just hours after a classified briefing over the multiple strikes against an alleged narco-terrorist boat back in September. Lawmakers had conflicting views about what they saw in that meeting. Listen.
I saw two survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs down for the United States, back over, so they could stay in the fight.
What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have two individuals in clear distress, without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who were killed by the United States.
Here we go. Let's bring in national security expert Rebecca Heinrich. Rebecca, welcome. So you're seeing these two conflicting views of what they saw in that video. What do you make of this?
Well, I think, Rachel, they can both be right. I think that what Senator Cotton saw was two individuals after the boat had been hit by the United States. These are alleged cartels. They're transporting drugs. One of the things I found reassuring, actually, Rachel, whenever these senators had this briefing, is both Republicans and Democrats agreed that the information they received gave them confidence that we did know that they were drugs. They were carrying drugs. So these were cartels. They are carrying drugs. So Senator Cotton saw these individuals. They were hit. He believes that they wanted to get back into the fight. The other senator, of course, says, look, they were distressed. Either way, it did look like the United States lawfully then hit the boat again to make sure that they destroyed the rest of that cargo. So I think we can both be unsettled by what we saw and understand that it was legally justified.
You know, it's interesting. I interviewed some Venezuelan for my Spanish show, and they were very much in favor of these boat strikes. They believe they're drugs. And they said, you know, if this was not a drug boat, if these were not narco-terrorists, in Venezuela, you would have seen, you know, videos from the family members talking about them, pleading because they were innocent. He's like, there's nothing. Nobody has come out to claim these narco-terrorists as their own, you know, innocent family members. So I found that actually very compelling. Here's Mark Thiessen's Washington Post op-ed. He says that, and the title of it, he says, Trump's boat strike playbook was written by Obama. Here's a quote from it. He says, there is nothing unlawful about hitting a military target multiple times to make sure it has been eliminated. President Barack Obama did it all the time. Indeed, in targeting cartels, it has designated as foreign terrorist organizations. The Trump administration appears to be closely following the playbook pioneered by Obama. Your reaction?
Well, that's very interesting, Rich. I think there is a lot of commonality. The other thing that I would say that was also reassuring was Senator Cotton came out and said, look, there was a lot of lawyers looking at this at the time. There was hundreds of U.S. military who were watching this strike, so this wasn't just a one-off decision by one particular commander. The other thing, Rachel, I found reassuring was that Senator Cotton said there were subsequent attacks that the United States, where Secretary Hegseth, you know, this campaign where we did hit a boat and there were survivors and we did not believe they were getting in the fight and we did do a rescue mission. So we, the United States, is still trying to follow the laws of armed conflict. It's no good to be a great country if you're not a good country. And so we are holding ourselves to those standards. And so I would suspect that we're going to continue to conduct oversight over this. But I agree with you, Rachel, that there is a lot of continuity here from the Obama administration.
So obviously, the Trump administration is talking a lot about the drugs on those boats. But none of us can ignore the, you know, elephant in the room, which is Maduro, and that there is a connection between these cartels and that illegitimate regime that is using the cartels are using basically the organs of that so-called government to conduct its business. So, are you sensing or seeing any indication that these drug boat strikes, now we're up to I think 22 of them, are having any impact on Nicolas Maduro and his willingness to step aside and take some sort of negotiated exit out of Venezuela so that the party that actually won 2 summers ago can take power?
Well, Rachel, that clearly seems to be the objective on the part of the United States, is to pressure Maduro to go. As you rightly point out, this is a nation-state cartel collaboration. They're symbiotic. So the nation-state funds or protects the cartel, helps the cartel helps the organs of the state. And that has been what's new about the Trump administration, is bringing this to the fore and explaining that there's essentially this network. And it's not just Venezuela, it's Colombia, it's Cuba, and they're in our hemisphere, and they're bringing drugs in and killing Americans. And so I do think that this pressure campaign on the part of the United States to bring all of this firepower into the region is meant to intimidate Maduro. Maduro is mocking the administration and acting like he's not afraid. I think that's a mistake. And I do think that if there were airstrikes on the part of the United States against the Venezuelan country, it would be against the cartels, the drug production, those kinds of things, which again will pressure the Maduro regime, because he needs those in order to stay in power.
Yeah, President Trump is protecting Americans from the drugs that these cartels are distributing in our country. But I've also, at my show, Fox Noticias, interviewed 6 sitting presidents and countless ministers and government officials in Latin America. And all of them are very much in favor of getting rid of this cartel state, this narco dictator. And so the support in Latin America, for me, at the highest levels, has been very enlightening. So, Rebecca, great to have you on this morning. Thank you for your insights.
Thanks, Rachel.
Got it.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.